Hi, it's Steve Gibson from the LaGrange Church of Christ, and I am out of the pulpit again, as you can see, shooting a little bit more from the hip than I normally do, especially last week's experiment into scripting. But right now, I feel like I just have to put out a video because of what happened in Texas. Yet another instance of children being killed in a place where they're supposed to be safe. And right now, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of fear, and I understand all that. I have small children, believe it or not, one of whom is still in what I would call elementary school. And so this hits home, and it's difficult to deal with, but I want us to consider the godly perspective on all this. First of all, the godly perspective is that this is horrible, and things like this shouldn't happen. We live in a fallen, broken world. But what we have to remember before we start pointing fingers at people is we have to remember that we're all participants in the world in which we live. We all add to this society. And I think the thing I want to say first and foremost is, as Christians, perfect love casts out fear. And as hard as it is to love right now, it's easier to hate and to blame and say, you know what, if those people weren't doing that and those people weren't doing that, then we wouldn't have these problems. And I don't know how true that is, but I do know that the people that I may point to are not my enemy. The enemy, the real enemy, is not of flesh and blood. Our fight is not against flesh and blood. Our fight is against spiritual powers that we can't really understand. And one of the things that those powers want us to do is to point at each other, to point at others of God's children, so that the love decreases, the fear and the anger that brings all this stuff increases. We got to realize that every time we participate in anger and reactions rather than love, we're participating in society, and we have to be honest. What are we doing? What role are we playing in world events right now? The more we do beautiful things, the less room there is in the world for ugly things to happen. And if we're not doing beautiful things, more and more ugly things will happen. And yeah, there are problems in our society. There are problems in our world. People rejecting God left and right. And that hurts God. But fear and anger are not helpful things. We experience fear and anger, as we should, when something like this happens. I'm worried for my children. I'm angry and hurt for the parents. And I mean, how many lives are forever changed after this happened? I mean, it's hard to calculate, and I don't calculate it because it'll get me really, really down. But I understand it. It is getting me down. So, I mean, what I want to say is, let's love everyone harder. And our kids are being taught that the world is nothing more than a collection of atoms. And our children are being taught that they're nothing more than an accident of nature. And that's not true. And we can fight against the system that teaches them that they're nothing more than a collection of atoms. That before they're born, they're just a collection of cells. And that after they're born, they're still an accident of the universe. But while we need to change those things, while we need to allow people to speak the truth of God in schools again, like they used to, that's not today's assignment. Today's assignment is to love everyone and pray that God does what he does in these situations. No matter how horrible a situation, God can turn it into something good. He turned his son, the only innocent man who ever lived, being tortured to death publicly. He turned that into the greatest thing that ever happened in history. So I know he can do something good with this, although I can't see it. I can't begin to see what that could possibly be. But I know how good our God is. And so let's all be in prayer to love all those people who are involved, and pray that God will bring changes where where people are more empowered to reach out to people in need, where schools are more empowered to intervene with problem kids, where police are more empowered, but also are acting in an ethical way. That's always the prayer. That's the prayer of justice, that justice is done. There is no justice in what happened in Texas this past week, the past few days. There's no justice in that, and God hates that. So let's pray that God brings justice in this present world. We know he'll bring ultimate justice when his son returns again. But until then, let go of our fear and our anger. Let it hit us. Let it pass. And let God's perfect love cast out our fear so that we can add beautiful things into the world. We can swarm the world with beautiful things, beautiful speech given to each other, just small words. What if somebody had said just something really nice the week before this guy had this issue? What if one person had said something really profoundly nice to him? You don't know who you're running into out there. You may be the voice that God puts in their life. So let's have our hearts open, our ears open, and our eyes open. And above all, let's thank God for his goodness and wait for him to redeem the world. I know it's difficult, but I hope that you see all the beautiful things God has done in this world, all the joy, and that maybe we turn off the 24-hour news cycle and just step outside and look at what he's done and maybe go talk to some people down the street about how good he is. We'll see you hopefully Sunday morning at 9:30 class, at 10:30 worship. But if not, we'll see you next time when I'm once again out of the pulpit.